Well, hello, welcome, and thank you for waiting. Thank you to all of you for tuning in and joining us for our very latest oceanographic roundtable discussion. It's lovely to have you with us once again online for this event. This is, of course, the latest in our ongoing series of oceanographic roundtable events. For a few of you still keeping track of just how many roundtable sessions we have hosted now, you're doing far better than I am because I lost count a long time ago. But suffice to say that all of our previous roundtable discussions are available to watch back on demand via the Oceanographic website or to enjoy in podcast format across both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. These roundtable discussions are a chance each week for oceanographic audiences around the globe to join us as we dissect and dive into some of the biggest headlines across the ocean news and ocean storytelling space. Now, already in this series of live discussions, we have most recently tackled the topics of the UK sewage crisis, the effectiveness of marine protected areas, the issues around unregulated and illegal fishing, and latterly the critical issue of fin whaling in Iceland and the severe overfishing crisis here in UK waters. We have also dissected the biggest announcements to come out of the Our Ocean Conference and taken the opportunity to celebrate some mega ocean wins, including shining a spotlight on the conservation and recovery projects taking place along the Sussex coastline here in the UK. So we have been able to table some of the happier conversations here on the roundtable too. This week will sadly fall into the former camp because this week we are revisiting that familiar subject of bottom trawling. More specifically, the impact of bottom trawling as compiled in a new report from Oceana UK on cetaceans and seabirds in the supposedly protected waters of the UK. Here is a bit of background on the story so far. And in a nutshell, not a single marine protected area designated to safeguard cetaceans in UK waters fully bans bottom trawling. It's the central finding of a new report from Oceana UK and the University of Plymouth, and one that accuses the British marine protection system of being nothing but protection in name only. The report draws together evidence that the harm caused by bottom trawling extends far beyond the seabed, impacting harbour porpoises, humpback whales, puffins, terns, and kittiwakes through habitat destruction, prey depletion, underwater noise disruption, and direct entanglement in fishing gear. The UK government's own assessments already identify bottom trawling as a threat in 75% of the MPAs in question. And what the report adds is the evidence that partial protection is, to put it simply, no protection at all. Some of the numbers are stark. Satellite tracking data reveals that the Southern North Sea Special Area of Conservation, a sanctuary designated specifically to protect harbour porpoises, was subjected to some 30,936 hours of apparent bottom trawling in 2025 alone. Meanwhile, according to DEFRA, 80% of fishers in England agree that the conservation and restoration of the marine environment is important for their own job security. The UK government has committed to a public consultation on bottom trawling management in 5 MPAs designated for seabirds and cetaceans, and that consultation has not yet produced binding action. Meanwhile, Oceana UK's position is clear. These areas must be entirely free of bottom trawling, not partially restricted, not subject to ongoing review, but fully protected in practice as well as on paper. So the question before us this afternoon is not whether the problem is real, but what it will finally take to fix it. And thankfully, to help us think through that question, I am joined this afternoon by a couple of experts in their fields. I am joined by Professor Emma Sheehan. Emma Sheehan is Professor of Marine Ecology at the University of Plymouth. Emma directs the Applied Marine Ecosystems Research Unit, specializing in marine protected areas, seafloor habitat recovery, and the environmental impacts on human activities like overexploitation and blue industry. She is best known for her globally recognized long-term monitoring of the Lion Bay Marine Protected Area, where her non-destructive survey techniques demonstrated how protecting benthic habitats from destructive trawling leads to ecosystem recovery. Emma, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Oh, thank you so much. And we are also joined by Izzy Ross, Habitats and Fisheries Campaigner at Oceana UK. With an integrated master's degree in genetics from University College London, Izzy combines her scientific background, experience in communications, and love of the ocean to advocate for healthy, thriving seas. She recently returned to the UK from Australia, where she built a communications department for one of Australia's leading ocean plastics charities. And prior to that, she led the campaigns team at Surfers Against Sewage during a pivotal time for UK water quality campaigning. Izzy, hello, and thank you for joining us as well this afternoon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, great. Well, well, thank you for being here. And with such a lineup, I have full confidence that we are in for an in-depth and insightful discussion around this new report, Trawled and Mauled. I am, by the way, Rob Hutchins, community editor here at Oceanographic, and my role this afternoon is to be asking all the questions. But to make it easier on me, do throughout this discussion post your questions for the panel into the chat, and I will endeavour to get as many of those answered for you as possible over the course of the next 30 minutes. Right, introductions made. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to get my breath back and let's jump into this conversation. And let's start with you, Emma, and to ask you a bit about your research, because your research sits at the heart of this report. Could you walk us through the methodology? How did you and the team go about building the evidence base that links bottom trawling to harm in species that never actually touch the seabed?
Yeah, sure. Going right back to 2008, Lyme Bay was one of the first large-scale marine protected areas to be protected from bottom tow fishing, so that's scallop dredging and trawling, from its entire site. And back then it was called site-based protection. And based on the research we then did, it's now been framed as the whole site approach. Because what we saw, although we were really focused on those reef habitats and the species associated with those rocky reefs, just because they're protecting the whole area, we then accidentally started seeing that animals that were reef associated were also emerging from these sediment habitats. And so, we then started realizing that sediments can actually stabilize and act more like a reef habitat, supporting species of conservation and commercial value if you don't dredge them. And this was the opposite that I've been taught as a young undergraduate. It's like sediments are mobile, therefore animals that live in it are used to being, turned over, therefore it's absolutely fine to trawl them. And this is what's been taught for a really long time. And it's because of this, it's a shifting baselines issue, because all of our observations on these types of habitats have been after industrialized fishing has taken place. So it's UK wide, but this also extends right across the globe, of the sheer amount, the huge effect that fishing has had on our habitats, turning huge areas that would have had oysters and musselbed reef into these sediment habitats. So they're already different to what they would have been pre-industrialized fishing. But we think that they actually can stabilize, they can provide these much more important habitats for these species. And then the link to the birds and the cetaceans is this is a key part, the bottom of the food chain for those top predators. And so they're providing their feeding habitats, nursery habitats for the species that they will then feed on.
No, wonderful. Thank you for that sort of broad overview there. And just to stick with you then and ask you about the report that identifies 4 distinct pathways of this sort of harm, which is habitat destruction, prey depletion, underwater noise, and then there's the direct entanglement. In your view, which of those is causing the most damage right now in those areas and in UK waters?
I don't have the statistics to back this up, but obviously the entanglement is really emotive, and that's awful for individuals to have to go through dying in that way. But to me, that fundamental destruction of the whole the whole food web that affects prey availability, I think has got to be hugely important, and it has been the direct driver of starving seabirds and issues for cetaceans getting enough food. And then the noise is really interesting, and we're talking more and more about this. And I'm starting to hear from different places around the world, places that are looking to protect MPAs called quiet MPAs. And I think this is really interesting, and certainly something that we can action quite quickly as well, and create this natural quiet space for these species.
That's interesting. I'd like to unpick that a bit more, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Because Izzy, I want to turn to you, and I'm going to ask you about this report and the timing of this report, because obviously Oceana has been campaigning on bottom trawling in MPAs for a substantial amount of time. So what made this report the right moment? Why commissioning this particular piece of work focused specifically on cetaceans and seabirds? Why now?
Yeah, I think Do you know what? I think any new research on bottom trawling in MPAs is important, but why cetaceans and seabirds now? Well, it's because we're expecting another consultation led by the Marine Management Organization and DEFRA into cetacean and seabird MPAs. So MPAs that are already designated to protect whales, dolphins, porpoises, and seabirds. And so we actually last year had the stage 3 consultation promised to us that we would see protections in 41 marine protected areas. We were still waiting for those stage 3 results, and we were expecting the stage 4 part of the consultation around cetaceans and seabirds to be out now. It's been delayed. So I think another important aspect of this report is that it's not just about cetaceans and seabird, it's about the whole ecosystem. It's about the fact that it's not just ripping up the seabed, it's all those things that we've been talking about. It's noise disruption, it's prey depletion, it's a whole ecosystem issue. And so, you know, we still want to see a ban on bottom trawling in those 41 marine protected areas that were consulted on last year, and we're still waiting for those results. And additionally, when that stage 4 consultation comes out around these MPAs designated for cetaceans and seabirds, we want to see the same. We want to see whole site bans on bottom trawling to protect, you know, these really lovable, iconic UK wildlife that are, you know, there's not that many of them. Like, they're large marine mammals, these cetaceans. Like, we want to protect our porpoises, you know, our iconic seabirds like puffins. It's really, it's not only important from a scientific perspective, but I think that the British public also don't want to see porpoises entangled, you know, prey depleted so much that seabirds are starting to suffer. So yeah, that's why it's important.
Yeah, totally. And obviously, coming back to the headline sort of takeaway from the report, is the finding that not a single cetacean MPA in the UK fully bans bottom trawling from across its entire site. Could you give us pull out for us just a few of those facts and figures, because they are quite startling, some of those numbers that we see in the report?
Yeah, so you're quite right in saying there's no MPA for cetaceans that whole site bans bottom trawling. Overall across those 113 marine protected areas designated for seabirds and or cetaceans, only 2 in 113 are fully protected from bottom trawling. Yet 75% of MPA assessments for those specialist MPAs actually say, yes, bottom trawling is a threat, and it's a threat that needs to be managed. So, you know, even the government knows that the vast majority of these marine protected areas are threatened by the harms, direct harms and the indirect harms of bottom trawling, and therefore they should be listening to their own data. And then, yeah, in terms of cetacean MPAs, I think it's 4 in 11 have had recommendations from the site assessments that they should also be banning bottom trawling. But as we say, none of those 11 MPAs specifically for cetaceans have done so. Yeah, so it's pretty stark at the moment. And although, you know, we hear this rhetoric from the government that seabirds and cetacean aren't really affected, it's not a direct effect, you know, that's not true. We show in the report that there is some data that shows bycatch is a problem. So from otter trawls alone, 118 porpoises are caught in bycatch per year in I think it's the Celtic and Irish seas. And if you put that up against how many you need to actually halt the decline of the population across all fishing, it should be a maximum of 82. So even in the small amount of data they're collecting on porpoise bycatch in certain types of trawling equipment, you know, we're already seeing it's too much. So, you know, there's the worry that the bycatch is being underreported. You know, it's not really thought about because obviously gill netting is a major issue for bycatch. But then you add that to all those indirect effects, and you can, it's easy to see how this damage is being done. If you're a porpoise going about your everyday life, and you're exposed to, you know, trying to avoid the actual trawler, you can't hear because of all the noise pollution. You can't find your prey and it's breeding season, and there's lots of different ways in which these beautiful individuals, like iconic wildlife, can suffer.
Oh yeah, I know. It's so enraging. And actually, I mean, the obvious question is the one that Charlie, a regular inquisitor of our roundtables, has asked, and it's pinched my question straight from me as well. Is that how is this actually legally possible then? What are the loopholes or the governance gaps that are allowing this to happen inside areas that exist to protect these species?
Yeah, I've been asked this a couple of times recently, and I wouldn't even call it a loophole. Like I wouldn't I guess give the government the credit of saying that they've even tried to protect these areas from bottom trawling. They just haven't tried to, really. I mean, there's limited protections in some areas, and we see a better approach from our inshore authorities looking at certain bylaws to protect certain areas. But I think overall the fact of the matter is that marine protected areas are often, unfortunately, protected on paper alone. And the government can pat itself on the back all it likes about reaching 30% marine protection by 2030, but if we don't actually protect those areas, we won't see the benefits, and we will still keep losing our precious marine ecosystems. And we don't want that. We don't want that for science. We don't want that for tourism. We don't want that for our, hopefully a thriving fishing future where, there's enough fish stocks that people can still make a livelihood fishing. So it's in everyone's best interest to make sure marine protected areas are protected. It's not a loophole. It's just permitted in some marine protected areas still. And that's what we want to change.
Yeah. Crazy madness to me. Emma, just to turn back to you and to draw on your expertise, and I'm going to direct this question to you, but this may be one for you as well, Izzy. But looking at the example of the southern North Sea and the harbour porpoise sanctuary within there, which suffered nearly 31 hours of apparent bottom trawling last year. From an ecological standpoint, what does that level of sustained disturbance do to a population of animals that is supposed to be under protection?
But I'll take it, and then Izzy, you can take over from me. But I think one of the key problems for me, and one of the reasons I think for it's not this loophole, but there's a lack of evidence for a reason to protect sometimes, is because there's just a lack of evidence. So that's how MPAs work. You evidence the feature it's been protected for, but when it's so degraded and damaged, it's very difficult. So it's just like ridiculous catch-22. And so my hope, and which is why I carry on doing this, is because the sea is so brilliant at recovery. And so it's more like, so your question made me think of this, because at the moment, they're turning over sediments, they're absolutely still destroying the prey that is left. We've had brilliant news about we don't have any more targeted sand eel fishing, which is excellent, but it doesn't mean to say this other sort of fishing is still having impacts on this prey base. So, but the fact if we'd let it recover, the impact of doing this sort of fishing would be huge. So I think this is the thing. I think, we just need to open up our minds for the potential of recovery and realise the maintenance of degradation that's happening with the type of fishing that we're allowed to continue in these areas, which have been designated for these amazing, large marine vertebrates.
Yeah, no, totally. And because you just mentioned sand eels there, can you just talk us through that level of that chain, and how the destruction of sand eel populations and other prey species could impact those at the top of the chain? Just to give us a full picture of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes it's direct. So today we're talking about seabirds and cetaceans, and so they're just incredible prey base for so many diving seabirds, and then it's that food chain. So slightly larger fish will eat those, and the sort of species that we're talking about, cod and haddock, which are so important for the larger marine vertebrates. So they're talking about cetaceans or seals. So it's I don't know, it's the sort of thing I learned at school. You start with the little fish and then the big fish, and so it is just about protecting the bottom of that food chain is so important because everything else depends on it. And that I've seen with my own eyes. If we actually just stopped dredging, so many times the fishermen say to me, it's just like ploughing a field. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. It is like ploughing a field, and that's not good for seabed ecosystems. They need to stabilize. They need to allow these things called hydroids and sponges and corals to grow and create structure, and that is where we have these amazing nursery grounds form, and things like this. The place I mentioned in the Isles of Scilly that's being protected for bottleneck fishing. This is in 90 meters of water, and it's dark. It's cold. And I think, again, it's sandy habitat. So when people did normal surveys, it's just sandy habitats, that's fine for trawling. But we put our cameras down and we were just amazed. We're seeing these loads and loads of these tiny little shark species, these little small spotted cat sharks, spur dogs that were pregnant. And you're like, my God, we just never would have thought, this is a really important nursery area. And so it's just, why I'm so excited is just all the things we've still got to learn. We just need to, give our habitats and environment a chance to recover and start resuming some of these functions that it just, does brilliantly if you leave it to it.
Yeah. Thank you for indulging my very basic question there. I was nervous about asking it. I thought this is way too simple, but you gave us a very colourful answer, so thank you. And actually, I'm going to turn this question has made me laugh from Annette, so I'm turning this to you, Izzy. Is the government pulling a fast one?
Yeah, maybe. Well, ask me again when we see the results of the stage 3 consultation. I know there are. Do you know what does give me hope is yes, the David Attenborough documentary was amazing, and people tell me all the time about how they saw it and they were so, they were so moved by it. And I do think politicians are people too, and a lot of them have seen it, and I think that there is a lot of want for this within Parliament, and it's just about getting it over the finish line. So yeah, ask me that in a few weeks or a few months when we see the consultation results, because I'm hopeful that it's not just the public that want an end to bottom trawling in protected areas.
Yeah, of course. And actually, on that point, obviously we're staring down the barrel of some big changes afoot in government. Number 10, and potentially Andy Burnham leadership is looking ever more likely. That will count bin face. Who knows? That's where leave that to the public to decide. But that must feel like an exciting period of potential. Is this now a time to start campaigning more than ever? Are there levers that you can pull there whilst we're facing this sort of time of transition?
Yes, definitely. I think it's if you're talking about Andy Burnham and what he could do if he comes into office for a quick win, well, get this consultation over the line. Make sure we're protecting those marine protected areas. The majority of the public is with us on this. 80% of our own polls showed that people want an end to bottom trawling in marine protected areas, but actually also worryingly 64% of people thought that they it was already banned. So there's an expectation for the public. It would be a really quick and easy, relatively quick and easy win to get that legislation over the line for Andy Burnham. So yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed. But I also think that regardless of what's happening at the very top, there are MPs and members of the Lords that actually they've been working on this behind the scenes for a while. So the work isn't lost. It's still in movement. And so we've got to keep our fingers crossed and also keep sending the postcards as part of this campaign. It's a good time for me to plug that. So yeah, if anyone wants to send a postcard to their MP to encourage the consultations over the finish line, you can do that for free. It takes a few clicks. Just go to our website, Oceana UK, and you can pick out of some lovely artwork that shows the beauty of our British seas, and you can give them their message.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, room for a plug always. And actually, let's talking about the economic impacts then that this report sort of dives into too. There's the 80% of fishers in England that agree that marine conservation is important for the security, for their job security, which is a remarkable figure. How do you guys then at Oceana UK use that data in your advocacy, and do you find that the economic argument for protection is gaining traction with government in a way that the conservation argument may not have always sort of managed?
Yeah, I think part of that is about sort of dismantling this big voice coming from some of the the larger super trawlers and less sustainable areas of fishing that they kind of represent themselves as representing all fishers. And actually, even in the short time that I've been working with Oceana in this role, I've been absolutely taken aback by the diversity of voices and different ways of fishing and being associated with coastal communities and fishing life. And actually, a huge amount of fishers want sustainable approaches to the sea because they want a future in fishing. And the fishing economy is an important one in the UK. It's also part of our history and our tradition. And for me, living in Newquay is a big part of our culture down here. And we're not against that. We are standing with smaller, low impact fishing and a movement towards a sustainable fishing future for everyone. And yeah, I think that's a really positive thing. And it's just kind of reminding everyone, including government, that those big industry voices don't represent the whole fishing industry. And actually a lot of people want our oceans and our fish and our cetaceans and seabirds to be thriving for securing the future of the economy and also the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously they're facing just mounting pressures, marine heat waves being another one, all these symptoms of climate change. I mean, it seems like an easy win that we start looking after that biodiversity and using that as our greatest ally in this fight against climate change. Emma, I'm going to turn to you, and I'm really sorry if this is a bit of a question that's put you on the spot. I don't mean to, but there is the argument, or sometimes there's an argument that's made, rightly or wrongly, that MPAs can tolerate some level of bottom trawling without significant ecological harm. Is that hogwash? Am I talking hogwash, or is there actual evidence that might back that up? Is there a safe threshold, or is that a false premise entirely?
I think the research that I've seen about that is just fundamentally flawed, because it will be using what they call natural baselines as today, which are significantly impacted. And so I have been involved with that kind of work and presented our work to the Welsh Assembly to show the difference. And so I just don't understand what any scenario where that would be a thing. And my only argument is that if you really want to trawl this area, just don't call it an MPA. At least, that's don't lie to the public, and go achieve your 30 by 30 somewhere else, but do it for real. I think so. Yeah, I can't think of a single reason why that would be a thing.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I felt awful asking that question. It's very against my own stance. So, okay, I'm going to ask you this one instead. So, looking ahead, if strong bottom trawling bans were implemented across all these MPAs tomorrow, how long are we looking at for meaningful ecological recovery to realistically take hold, and what would we expect to see first?
Well, what would happen is the smallest life, the goo, might start to be able to just start binding sediments together and allowing other species to start colonize these habitats. And this does take time. And this is a really key thing. This isn't an overnight fix. We're not talking about active restoration here. And so from our research, and we've done loads of these kind of long-term monitoring projects all over the place, and it seems like nothing's really happening when you're using cameras to make your observations for the first few years. But really, by year 3, you're starting okay, something's happening. And then 5 seems to be a real magic number. Whether I'm studying the restoration effects of an offshore mussel farm or exclusion of bottom tow fishing, 5 years in temperate waters really seems to be a point where you go, yeah, that's it. We've got a functioning ecosystem. But I still have no idea how long it takes to actually get to some sort of like plateau. So, in Lyme Bay, we're still monitoring every single year by hook or by crook. We go out and we do our surveys with the cameras that we've been doing every year since 2008. And we're still seeing, variability. And some of it's been driven by, huge storms that happen, and then they kind of reset the recovery, and there's all sorts of things. But, the next thing we're looking at is this, what people are calling, you're sort of hinting at, I think, the octopus invasion. And I definitely don't want to talk about octopus. That's all I seem to talk about. But yeah, so it's really interesting. So I think, 5 years, it'll be looking good, and then who knows how long it takes when we actually say, right, we've recovered. I don't know what that is. I'm not old enough yet.
Oh no, but great. It's good to see that those messages of hope. And no, I've learned now not to ask a Cornish person about the octopus situation going on right now. Had the pleasure of diving in Cornwall recently and saw two. And I'm told it's nothing to write home about.
Oh no, but it is. They're my favourite.
Yeah, mine too. Izzy, coming back to this. You've mentioned it already, but the 30 by 30 targets, that's protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. It's a commitment that the UK government has made publicly and repeatedly. How does the current reality inside these MPAs sit alongside that commitment? And at what point does the gap between that target and the practice become something imaginary or untenable?
Yeah, so I think we're already at that point where the government thinks that they've already achieved 30 by 30 in some areas, and as I said, it's on paper alone, because actually we're not seeing the right protections in marine protected areas. So I think that's the worrying thing, is that we've got to make the government recognize the difference between saying something is something and something actually being something, saying protection and actually seeing protection. So that comes from, making sure that we have destructive fishing methods banned. It also comes from ensuring proper enforcement as well of this legislation, to ensure that there isn't, illegal fishing happening after those pieces of legislation are put in place. But it also means making sure that we have 30 by 30 in the inshore, in offshore, in the high seas as well. So there's still a long way to go, but as Emma was saying, the ocean can restore itself fairly quickly. If we're talking about timescales, we do see recovery very much within people's lifetimes. So there is still time to actually protect 30 by 30 if we do it right now. And it's not to say that that's easy, but it is absolutely doable. And it is important for, all the reasons that we discussed, and to ensure that our oceans are resilient to climate change as those effects really ramp up over the next few years. This is an area in which we can just make sure that the ocean is as resilient as it can be to effects that are coming. And that's another issue that we need to tackle. But we will see climate change effects, and we do need to make sure that we're providing as much resilience against that as possible.
No, absolutely. And just actually on that note of that global sort of perspective, I just wanted to say thanks for your message, Scott, there, who from Alaska. There is a huge push to stop bottom trawling as well, hoping these efforts have real momentum and we can make meaningful changes across the globe ASAP. Thanks for sending that comment in, Scott. I feel like a daytime TV presenter now. And I want to draw our attention to Charlie's question, which is quite a pertinent one. If a sanctuary allows bottom trawling, does it legally still count towards our global 30 by 30 biodiversity targets? And who actually polices whether our 30% is real or just blue washing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say that I guess in the round, it's self-reported. So, the government is reporting on its own,
homework.
yeah, his own homework essentially. Yeah, there's definitely some global movements that are, you know, tracking this in different ways, and we'll say, you know, that there should be a global standard where bottom trawling just isn't allowed in marine protected areas. And so it is about ensuring that our own government has I guess its own measures in place to ensure that they're upholding themselves to that I guess that standard of marine protected area is a big problem globally, and it's not, you know, it's not just Oceania UK, and it's not just Oceania across the globe. It's lots of charities working to try and make sure that the global goals, the national goals, the EU goals, etc., are all as best as they can be. And so, yeah, like hopefully this Trawled and Mauled report contributes to that in you know, a small but significant way, to say actually this very small part of MPAs that need to be designated for cetaceans and seabirds within the UK are up to scratch, and we need to do that, yeah, incrementally until we see proper protection across national MPAs and globally. But yeah, unfortunately it is some marking of your own homework there at the moment.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Just to sort of, I'm very aware of times, and you guys are busy when you've got places to go. So I'm going to ask just a couple more questions, and it's about just if there was anything, Emma, anything in the report that genuinely surprised you, any findings there that even you, with your experiences and knowledge of the issue, that you didn't expect to see.
Yeah, sadly, I wasn't surprised. Yeah, I think it's a accurate representation of where we're at. And so, yeah, like Izzy's saying, there's lots of work to do. But we are, you know, we're really optimistic. Can I just pick up on something you were saying about the fishermen?
Of course.
It's just because I think what Izzy said is just so important, and I think sometimes we just don't realise, and we talk about the fishing industry like one thing, and it is, there's so many different groups within that, and everything I've done is with local fishermen. So even developing the camera equipment that I use in Lyme Bay, I didn't know how to fly a flying array. There wasn't a thing, you know, we just built it and they helped me make it. And then they were the ones that were saying, no, we were kind of responsible for maybe overfishing this area, and we think we've been doing some damage, and, you know, we think this protection could be a good thing. Other voices are saying, this is outrageous, you've kicked us out. But then really recently, it was covered on UK Country File. They did a really nice interview with a guy who's still fishing inside this protected area. Because we're not talking about no take zones today. We're still talking about areas that, you know, can be fished, just not with bottom toe fishing. And this man talked so passionately about how his catch is now diversified. You know, so we're skipping forward 18 years since protection. His catch is diversified, his gear is safe because it's not being trawled away. And so it just sounds so negative, like stop the trawling. And actually it's like creating space for not just nature, but for people as well to make sustainable livelihoods, you know. So it's a really good thing, you know. And so we can have a conversation another day about how much should actually be no take zones. You know, I don't think we should be absolutely everywhere, but I can definitely say that I've witnessed the ability of the sea to sustain a certain amount of exploitation from us. But that's the sweet spot. We have to get that right, and we, you know, as long as we're not like undermining the very integrity of the seabed, there's a level that we can kind of cream off the top sustainably, and that allows all the birds and cetaceans and seals to also, you know, survive as well. So that's the next step. But this is just the fundamental message.
Yeah.
This is like, for me, the least we can do. Let's get this out of the MPAs.
Yes, absolutely, and a really critical point to have raised. And unfortunately, we couldn't be joined by one of those voices, Clive Mill, former trawlerman and small scale sustainable fisher, who has been sort of singing those exact. Or from that hymn sheet, and would be the voice for that community. And I can't speak for him, but yeah, obviously a very important part of the conversation to platform, and we'll have to do something like this again and bring those voices to the platform as well. Izzy, so yeah, thank you for that, Emma. And then Izzy, just to turn that question to you then, anything about anything that surprised you?
Do you know what? I'm gonna answer the question, but in a slightly different way. So something about making this report for me that was really, I guess, hit home about the issue was, I don't know if anyone's seen it yet, but we did a massive projection of bottom trawling footage onto a cliff at Botany Bay in Kent, which is just right out. It just looks out on the Outer Thames Estuary SPA, which is one of the marine protected areas in the report. And I think just talking to the locals about how much they enjoy the sea there and the wildlife there, and then seeing the sun go down with this cliff and this like wildlife footage and bottom trawling footage on the cliff, I was just like, do you know what? This like epitomizes what we stand to lose if we don't do something about it now. And so for me, I loved helping form this report, but that was like a moment for me where I was like, wow, I love what I do. And I just, would recommend anyone watching it on our socials, because it's an absolutely beautiful video, and it very much, I guess, like summarizes the heart of this campaign and why we want to protect these beautiful areas.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. No, you're right. I wasn't expecting that answer at all. So that's a great response. Thanks so much. And that feels like a really nice sort of way to wrap things up and tie up the conversation. So look, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your insights and expertise. And Emma, I've watched that sun sort of shift across. Now, partially blinding you, so I think wrap it up and save your eyesight. So look, just to say thank you so much for your time and your energy and sharing your insights and expertise, and answering all those questions. You've both been wonderful, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in and to listen and watch this from home or wherever you guys are. And if you've enjoyed this roundtable session, be sure to come back next week when we will tackle next week's biggest story at the same time and the same place. And do check out Oceanographic, the Oceanographic platform, for all the latest details on our live Ocean Talks events, as well as our printed magazine and everything else that we have to offer. Which leaves me with nothing more to add other than have wonderful evenings, everybody. And thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.